Okay, hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for taking the time today to join us for our webinar, Pivot Digitally, How to Amplify Your Digital Engagement. My name is Carrie Blair and I am the Marketing Manager here at Altruas. And before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, all participants are muted. If you've dialed in by phone, make sure to select telephone in the audio panel and to enter your audio PIN to eliminate any echo between your computer and your phone. Please submit all questions via the questions box, and we will cover those at the end of the presentation. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a copy. I am pleased to introduce our speakers today. We have Parimal Patel. Parimal is an operating executive focused in the areas of strategy and operations with multi-industry experience. And we also have Bianca Reber. She is our marketing specialist, and her focus is in marketing and advertising, and she's led many campaigns to help clients amplify their digital engagement. And some of those we're going to hear about today. So very excited for this presentation, and we'll hand it off to Parimal.
Sounds good. Thank you, Carrie, and welcome everyone. We'll first start with the agenda and we'll start walking you through all the content. Today we're going to talk a little bit about calming the chaos. That's really, what headspace are we currently in and why? Right, a lot of things going on, so we'll talk a little bit about where we're at. Where we focus today from a marketing standpoint, focusing on a customer, so how do we do that more effectively? What can success look like? So what results could we expect by pivoting a bit? Digital engagement solutions, Bianca will take us through some tactical items we can walk through to be better, measure better, and then repeatable model. And that's really a function of building something that can be a baseline for future successes, entering new markets, enhancing in current markets. So we'll jump right into calming the chaos. Okay, so setting the stage. It's 2:30 in the morning on a Thursday. We're laying in bed, staring at the ceiling. We're trying to stay above water. We've lost customers. Many of us are operating a bit more leaner. We have a virtual workforce. Many of us are not used to operating this way. And so, a core question is, how do we think strategically? How do we think differently if all we're trying to do is stay above water, right? The loss of revenue, reductions in force, virtual workforces. We're sort of freaking out. I've heard that from several of our clients. And so the thought today is, what are some of these small moves that we can make to create big waves? And we're going to focus on prioritizing activities and maximizing spend, and then creating something that's repeatable. So where do we start? What will change look like? What are the priorities? How do we communicate to our folks? When do folks come back to the office? How do they come back safely? Those are all questions that are at top of mind. If we look at the near term, one of the things that I urge all of us to do, including our team, it's about being nimble and perseverance. And the reason it's important to think that way is, we all were in a position, whether it was months ago, years ago, decades ago for some, here's a baseline of where we are today and here's where we want to grow. So, the perspective that I bring to the table today is, as we look at how we can pivot digitally, where can we go, what can we do? It's about setting up our teams to be successful, our sales and marketing teams specifically here. But then as we optimize the operation, as we look at a virtual workforce, how do we look at this from the standpoint of setting a baseline and evaluating where we go, how to engage customers from here? So as opposed to survival, focusing on what we've lost, focusing on the things we don't have, focusing on, for lack of better words, the freaking out or being overwhelmed, how do we start to think of this as, okay, today is our baseline. We enter the room. We need to come up with some sort of plan of where to go. What are we going to do, right? So take a positive spin on this as a baseline. How do we move forward? Long term, that's going to be about building that repeatable model from a sales and marketing standpoint. Of course, being an operating guy, repeatable seems more natural. It's about building a digital engagement model to keep customers engaged and to understand how they're engaging. What do they want from us? What are their preferences? So it's taking some of the churn and burn out of trying to reinvent for every market we want to enter, and really trying to define something from a foundational level that can be instituted and repeated in multiple markets, but then refined based on demographics and things going on. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. So where are we focused today? We can talk a bit about the past and the present. It really comes down to traditional marketing versus the more digital aspects of marketing. If I look at where we're focused today, some of the questions that I would ask, and we'll have a poll at the end of this for you guys to engage as well. Where are we focused, and are we focused more on traditional marketing or digital? So it's not to say that traditional marketing is no longer applicable. It's just, what is the mix, and do we really know what the mix is, or are we just throwing spaghetti at a wall trying to hope things work? What enables us to engage with our customers? What technologies do we have? What do we have at our disposal as a team? And what exists in the marketplace for us to use to enable our engagement with our customers, whether online, digitally, or traditionally? What is driving that approach? Again, this is sort of the underlying internally. What is the reason that we're doing what we're doing today? And then we get into what are our customer preferences. So the reason this is important, we'll focus on our customers here in a moment. We oftentimes will look at this from an internal standpoint, saying, what do we need to do to ensure we get revenue? And if we take the customer out of that equation, or we just look at it from a focus group standpoint, again, we're asking questions that help us internalize and to think that we understand versus focusing on the population or the segmented customers that we want to target. And the thought there is, how do we understand those customers so we can engage with them a bit better? So we'll jump into a quick poll to see how everyone is feeling and where they're at. The question would be, I think Carrie, you can select the poll. There it is. How are you measuring, or actually, are you measuring your efforts today? Not even the how. Be interested to see how many folks are measuring today and even how many are unsure. In some ways, I would say we are measuring today, but we're still unsure about certain areas. All right. All right, we're closed. So let's see, 56% were yes, you're measuring today. That's stellar. More than I would have thought, which is great. 22% are no, and 22% are not sure. So what I would say from these numbers are a couple of things. And as we go through this presentation, here are some things you can write down to try to capture as Bianca and I speak. Those that are the yes, yes, you're measuring your efforts today, but is it effective, and what are you measuring? For the no's, merely where could you start? And for the not sure's, what are some of the things that we're going to discuss today that you can institute quickly or even think about instituting? And we'll go through, some of the how-tos and even, well, where do you start if you haven't started anything as of yet. Okay, so next. Awesome. So our customers, they're front of mind. We want to engage as many as possible. A lot of times we walk into a marketing meeting, we talk about how do we get more hits? How do we get more applicants if it's recruiting? How do we get more customers if it's a product or service? We're great at identifying the struggles and the ways that we internally struggle and how customers struggle to engage with us. The next piece is, what is the overall customer experience and what does that customer journey look like? We're not going to talk about a bunch of journey mapping and how you get to know your customer today. At the core of it, it becomes, what are the small moves that we can make to pivot digitally to then engage with our customers? And a couple of thoughts. If we look at what are the top 3 things that could stand out for an individual as they engage in this conversation from a company standpoint, Salesforce recently put out a survey, and 84% of customers consider the experience just as important as any product or service. So as we look at the second stars notation, what it comes down to is folks are not just buying items, especially through e-commerce, because they feel like it's an item that hits home to what they really want. They'll buy it because of the reviews. They'll buy it because of the online brand and reputation. They'll buy it because someone else has said it's a great product. I personally, if I look at anything on a website and it says it's 1 to 2 stars, I tend to look at the next and I resort so I can see the things with 4.5 to 5 stars. Then I look at the volume of ratings and I say, okay, that sounds great. I'm going to buy it, not having any clue why I just bought what I bought. But what it's showing, poll after poll and survey after survey, is that folks are buying because of the trends of purchases from other folks. And so it becomes more about the brand and the reputation and the entire life cycle of a customer, from not just a purchase, but also how the company takes care of them long term. And then as we look at the life cycle, not just how do we reclaim and re-engage with the folks that we may have lost from a customer base standpoint in early 2020 through all of the challenges that 2020 has brought forth, but it really comes into a repeatable model around finding, attaining, growing, and nurturing customers moving forward. Building a brand that stands out, building those raving fans that will come back, not just about how do we get as many customers as possible. So with that, enough about what could be. I'm going to pass it over to Bianca, and she'll talk about some of the items around digital engagement to help you guys understand how to be better.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I bet all of you guys have access to this webinar through your phone or your computer. Now, within these phones and computers, your customers, every single person has one. Every single person utilizes and accesses their computer and their phone. So that's a way to reach out to your potential customers, potential clients. So what can success look like if you're reaching them correctly? And how do you go about doing that and creating that digital strategy? So you've probably heard the term organic tactics. Now, this is one that is not utilized enough, especially when it comes to campaigns, specifically with paid campaigns. Organic tactics are reaching out to your customer without that ad spend, without that ad right in front of their face. And there's multiple different ways to go about doing that. Even recently, within the past 4 months, a lot of people have started to engage on online groups and forums, and that's where a lot of potential customers lie as well. With that comes paid campaigns. You're all familiar, whether that's paid Google search, on social media. You're very familiar with all these different terms. Paid campaigns are also a very great way to target your customer. Now, with these organic tactics and paid campaigns, it also helps increase your SEO and brand awareness. And for those of you that are not familiar with SEO, that's search engine optimization. So any of you who have ever logged into Google, how many of you guys have actually ever gone over to page 50 or 60 or 100? Many of you probably didn't even know there is that many pages once you pull up a search. But the thing is that there's a lot of really good companies and a lot of really good content that actually live within those pages. But about 90% of people do not go past page 1. So they stay on that page. So how do you, with these tactics and these paid campaigns, how do you make it so that you get to page 1 and also build your brand awareness? So what can success look like? So we're going to walk you through what success looks like for one of our private mid-market clients. With this, we ran 2 different campaigns, a recruitment campaign and a consumer campaign. And the whole model was built to build a model that can digitally engage and target a very specific audience, but with very low spend. This is what some of the numbers through running the campaign, the increase. So if you see here at the top, there's a 130% increase in total impressions. Now, impressions and reach, if you're familiar with that term, is how many people actually see your ad, whether that's organic or paid. We saw a 130% increase with people actually engaging and seeing our ads and also all of our different platforms. We saw a 48% decrease in ad spend. Yes, that is correct, a decrease in ad spend. Many marketing agencies will tell you right up front that the only way that you'll see results is if you truly maximize your ad spend, and that is completely false. There's been multiple times where we've had clients that come and ask to increase the budget, and we come back at them and say that's not needed yet because there's multiple tactics, which we will walk through very shortly. We saw an 87% brand and SEO increase as well. Now, organic tactics and paid are going to help jump your SEO ranking when it comes to Google search and also your searchability. With the different organic tactics and paid that we implemented, we saw an 87% increase, which also helps people land on their page or social platforms. And we also saw an 104% engagement increase. So people engaged a lot more with the content that was being pushed out, whether that was an ad or whether that was just an organic post. So let's run over some digital engagement solutions. As we walked through brand awareness, whenever you go through campaigning and really try to build that repeatable model, it's also going to go hand in hand with that brand awareness, where you really try to build that strong foundation to acquire that customer, but also really build that strong brand and so that people know who you are and what you stand for. Target audience. This is very particular, something that you need to do because you really need to identify who your audience persona is. And believe it or not, there's multiple. So you really have to narrow down the most effective tactics to launch and to really truly target that persona. Whether one ad works in one region and it doesn't in the other, that's one where you have to truly engage to see. And then to our final one, the campaigns, organic plus paid. So they work hand in hand together. A paid campaign will definitely do better and you will see a better ROI with the organic tactics in hand. Like I mentioned before, a lot of marketing agencies will tell you that you have to launch with a lot of ad spend, and we do quite the opposite. So we try to tackle the campaign with the least amount of ad spend by focusing on the organic funnel, but also multiple different tactics in our repeatable model. So here's a repeatable model. So we're going to walk through the different tactics of how you can reach that customer, whether that's through the phone or the computer. So social, you're all very familiar with this. So there's multiple different ways to engage with that customer. So there's multiple things within specifically Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn that you can join within different groups. So when it comes to organic, engaging with that group, whether that's on Facebook or LinkedIn, and posting content that's relative to either build your brand awareness or to really zone in on what you're trying to get that customer to see. Also running different paid campaigns. There's a lot of people that utilize these, so making sure that you have the right messaging and graphic also plays really big into this. Programmatic advertising. Every single person here is familiar with this. One day you're looking at a pair of shoes, and the next day as you're browsing on another website, those pair of shoes pop up right next to you. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this. That's what programmatic advertising is, and that's getting right in front of your customer in the right place. This is very good tactic to specifically go after if you have a very niche target audience and a small one. It gets right in front of the ones that you need. Radio and music streaming. So targeting your audience through these channels is very engaging. There's a lot of people that utilize, whether that's Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. There's a lot of people that are engaged there within podcasts. So is that the right area for your ad to also live in? Paid search. This all goes back to our Google search assessment where we said, where do you lay? Where are you? So one of the things is that if you wanted to implement also a paid campaign with Google search is you can put your ad up at the top, which I'm sure you're familiar with when doing searches for a particular item or a business. And so you can target your audience through this channel because everybody pretty much accesses Google or one of their partners daily. Going back to the brand awareness and the SEO. So a lot of you talked about that you do look at your marketing efforts and you are tracking it. So are you also evaluating your brand health and your SEO? There's a lot of things that could be on your website that are actually holding you back from being searched, and specifically even on your social platforms. I always tell people that anyone can go and throw up a pretty website with pretty pictures, specifically even with your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your Instagram. But if no one's engaging and you're not getting any ROI from that or any conversions, then what is the point of that platform? You really need to go and evaluate what your brand health is and also how you stand on that SEO, because there's really easy things that you can do to make sure that you get up on that list. Influencer marketing. This has become very popular within the past few years. Because of these platforms, social platforms of Facebook and Instagram, a lot of current customer bases rely on these influencers, people who have very large followings, to tell them what to buy, where to go, pretty much what to do with their life. So these influencers have really taken over the market. But the key thing to note with this is, are you choosing an influencer that really works with your brand? Just because they have a large following doesn't mean that their audience is specifically tied to the audience that you're going with. So when going after and identifying who that influencer is, you have to make sure that they represent your brand. Group engagement. This has been very successful within the past month specifically. So ads aren't the only way to reach your audience. Now, I'm sure that many of you, if someone recommends something to you, a family or a friend, you're probably going to go try it out. But when you see a little ad scrolling through Facebook or going on a website, it's not as easy for you to go ahead and try that out. With this group engagement, it's a lot less adsy, let's say, because you're posting organically and you're identifying with the group and understanding what their needs are and what they're looking for. And so these group engagements, whether that's through social or business forums, are really, really good, especially going with paid campaigns. Now, going with saying that you don't need to put a lot of ad spend towards this, specifically with this repeatable model, we had an instance with one client that we had to stop for a time being on running some ad campaigns, and they reached out to us and just said, hey, we're going to put some up. Can you just make sure that we did this right? So we didn't run the ad spend. All they did was throw up a couple of campaigns on social and also programmatic. Well, those campaigns ran for 3 weeks, and they were a very high ad spend budget. They saw 0 ROI. So not one person that engaged with those ads actually became a conversion. And that's where it comes into play with saying that you can't just throw up money on any of these tactics, but this model works hand in hand. So if an agency tells you to only utilize one tactic, then they're not really giving you the best, I can't think of the word, what's the word I'm trying to say? Options. There you go. The best options of what to access. So make sure that when you're going after your audience, that you're not putting all of your ad spend budget on just one tactic. So let's summarize. So one of the things that we did at the beginning was try to assess where you're at today and where you need to be near term. So how are you trying to reach your audience? What are you currently doing? Number 2, know your customers. So how are you reaching them currently, and how do they want to be reached? That's a question that a lot of people fail to recognize and try to look at, is how do your customers actually want to be reached, and what's the best way to get that conversion with them? 3, prioritize activities and build a digital engagement plan. So what tactics work for you? We've seen many campaigns where in one region, one tactic works tremendously, and we see a very high engagement. But then in one other region, nothing comes out of it. So you really have to prioritize which tactics work in which region and with which audience. And 4, after zoning in on which tactics work best, we build out a repeatable model. Now, this model can be used on multiple different industries. So whether that's business to business, a consumer campaign, a recruitment campaign, or simply building your brand awareness, then this model can be used for all of those. So what's the next step? We're going to provide an 8-question survey for you at the conclusion of this webinar, and we strongly encourage you to take this survey and submit it to Paramal and I, and we would love to set up a 30-minute call with you to review your results, but also see where you're at and how you're currently trying to reach and target your customers.
All right. So thank you so much, Paramal and Bianca. I always love hearing you guys present on this topic. Just hearing what's working for other companies, especially when many of us are home and we are trying to reach our customers online. So love these ideas. If you have any questions, we will try to get to all of them. So please take a minute to submit any that you have. And we do have some questions that have come in. If I'm not ready to start with all of these options, where do you recommend that I start? Parimal, Bianca, anyone want to chime in on that?
So I'll start, and then Bianca can chime in as well. There's a lot of options in front of you. There's a lot of ways to engage. I think a core piece of this is understanding what you want to achieve and what the ultimate outcome is. So is it about just getting customers? Is it about Facebook? Is it about a certain social media platform? Are you doing well on one versus another? This is really where the KPIs or the measurements come in place. So I think, from a macro level perspective, it's really understanding where you want to be and where you want to go. And I know Bianca has some thoughts around tactically what you can actually start with that would be quick wins. So I'll let her talk through those.
Yeah, so with that repeatable model, there's a lot of tactics, but that's because it doesn't mean you utilize them all at once. I mean, you can, but you want to identify specifically first where your target audience is. So if you haven't already built out kind of your audience persona, so who are you trying to market to, where and where do they live? And when we say that, where are they online digitally more? So if we looked back at that repeatable model, there was multiple things from paid search. You can run on Google Trends, which is free, a report to see how many people are searching a certain term, what in that industry. So there's a lot of even organic ways that you can run reports to see where that currently holds in the market. But I would first identify where your audience lives and then try out 2 tactics to launch with at first.
Okay, great. Here is another question. What's a good benchmark for ad spend? For an ad spend budget, I think is what they mean.
Yeah. So quite often, and I don't want to say it depends, but it does depend. And you can even Google and do a lot of research on this. Depending on the size of the company, for some of the more mature companies, for instance, they'll say somewhere between 5 to 7%. Again, depending on where you look to market and how you look to engage your customers. I'm not a big fan of those numbers, and the reason is, if I state a number, 5 to 7% of your revenue, the next action is, what do we need to do to go spend all of that money? And I think our perspective is slightly different and likely unique, where part of what Bianca spoke to was, how do you maximize your actions and maximize your customer engagement with as little spend as possible? And so a lot of the way that we're approaching this is, what do we need to set in place from a foundational level to spend the least amount of money and do quite a bit of testing and monitoring as we progress to ensure that we're optimizing spend, and not just saying, go spend 5 to 7% of your revenue and hope to get results. Now, the counter could be, let's go spend a lot of money. Great, but let's spend it optimally so that we get more results versus spending it and wonder why we don't get results.
Yeah, and what I'll go along with that is, so with ad spend, the reason why I say paid and organic goes hand in hand is because, so when you launch an ad campaign, a lot of agencies will say, like, throw a lot of money at it directly. So let's take, for example, social. So if you're trying to target your audience through social, this is a crazy number, but a lot of the times for one day I run a campaign on $7.50. And you're probably thinking that is a very low number for ad spend, but you can really see with $7.50 how your actual customer engages. You don't need to throw hundreds and hundreds of dollars per day to see, and that's where organic comes into play. So a lot of the platforms want you to just set up your ads and put a lot of money on it, and they want you to just run it for 14 days, 10 days. On Facebook, you'll see that if you try to run an ad less than 4 days, error sign pops up and says, your ad performs better if you run this for 4+ days. Well, that's actually not true. So what you want to do is really try to see what the numbers are looking like and how people are engaging with that spend and which tactics. So that kind of goes back to the previous question is I would test out a few different tactics at first at a very low spend and then see who engages, where you're seeing that ROI, and then kind of go up from there.
Okay, perfect. All right, we have some more questions in. How does engagement on Facebook and Instagram comments affect ad spend? So this is actually 2 questions. So how does it affect ad spend? And if I comment on the ads and customers comment, does that decrease the cost?
Nope. Okay, so let's see. So the 2 questions. So how does engagement on Facebook and Instagram comments affect ad spend? So it does. So it does not affect ad spend. So to answer the first one, it does not. So actually, you want to interact because specifically, if you're putting out an ad talking about buying a product, and if someone posts on your ad, well, ask you a question about that product, and then you don't respond, that also doesn't tie back with really good brand awareness as well. So you want to you do want to comment back and be pretty quick with it as well, specifically on Facebook and Instagram. So because that also goes back to showcase who you are as a brand. And then the second was, if you comment, does it affect the ad spend? No, it does not. So whenever you run different ads, depending on the platform, it'll show you engagement, comments, posts, shares, and clicks. So how much your cost per click is. That's stuff that you want to see more comments and more shares, because then that means your ad's actually working and getting people talking about it. So if someone's not commenting on it, then I'd be worried. That's where you want to go and change your messaging. So.
Okay. Next question. What metrics are used to verify or validate that your approach is working?
All right, so what metrics are used? So we use multiple different metrics to see how the ads are running. So one thing too is if your agency isn't meeting with you on at least a weekly basis to talk about how your ads are running, then you may want to look at that, because with certain markets specifically, it changes all the time. So one thing I can definitely say is with a client that we've had pre-COVID was very different versus now. So with how the audience is engaging, so on all ads. And so we've had to truly actually pivot on how to go after certain ones. And so the metrics that we use to see this is one, so cost per click. So how many people are actually clicking on the ads, how many people are actually engaging on it. And it's very different across multiple different markets, but also very different across different audiences. So if you're running something with recruitment or purchases, then you want to see how much is the cost per applicant or how much is the cost per purchase. So how much did it cost to actually get the person to follow through and purchase your product or engage with whatever you were trying to push at them, apply for a job you're pushing out. How much did that cost? If that number is extremely high, then you're also going to want to reevaluate your messaging. And so looking at those 2 things, I'd say cost per click, but also engagement. So we kind of ran through a little bit about impressions and reach. So when you're looking at that, and with every ad that you run, no matter where that's at, take example radio. So we're running now an ad on radio. I can see daily how many people listen to it, and I can also see how many people actually engage with that ad. If it's very low, then I'm not going to put any more ad spend towards that tactic and move to another one on the repeatable model. So looking at engagement, cost per click, and then also probably cost per purchase. So.
You know, one that I'll add to that is as you look at how your customers engage, you think about it from a process or a funnel standpoint, there's the negative metric around where folks fall out. So why did they not purchase? Why did they not engage further? And so having call it back end or technology that supports being able to see when they are engaging, how are they engaging? But when they're not engaging, you're seeing the lower percentages, how to ascertain why. It's difficult to do that until you know where in the process they are falling out. So having a mechanism in place to really understand during that flow, where's the disengagement happening, to then understand what the concerns could be, can drive a lot of the where do we go tactically to then drive additional engagement from there.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So another question that's come in, we are having a hard time getting people through the door, and we've never done digital. Any thoughts or recommendations?
Okay, so they're having a hard time getting people through the door and they've never done digital. Well, then this is their perfect opportunity. So if you have never done digital, then this is a great place to start. Specifically, I don't know what the business is or what the business is, but everyone uses their phone. So I've had people say, well, what if my product doesn't, the people they're looking for it's not, I don't need to run a digital campaign. I always go back, does the person that you're trying to target use a phone, and do they use a computer? Because if they do, then it definitely can work for you. So I don't know what your business is, but it would be a really great place to start would be if you have zero digital, so no website, no social platforms or anything, then I would definitely build those first and get those up. And really try to narrow down your messaging. So messaging is very important, not just with ads, but with what you put up on across all your digital channels, because people, just like people only look at page 1 of Google, on websites, there's a pretty high bounce rate across the board with a lot of websites based on what's up there. So truly try to get your messaging, narrow down on your messaging, but then also based on who your audience is, build out that persona. So you've heard us say that throughout this conversation, because that's very important, because another thing you don't want is people engaging with your ad that are not relevant to your ad. And that's one thing. If you make your ads too broad and where you're placing it at and you're not narrowing it down on that target audience, then it goes back to the pages with the pretty pictures. It looks great, but it's not doing anything. If your ad is being shown to millions and millions of people, is that really, you want to narrow it down on that target audience. So those would be my 2 recommendations. If you're not digital yet, build up those platforms, and then also build out who that audience persona is that you'll be kind of targeting with them.
Okay, great. All right, we have some more questions coming in. If you think about one of your most successful campaigns that you've run, was there something that most contributed to your success?
I'll start with one. I think ultimately it comes down to execution. And so when it comes to a campaign, it's not just about putting an ad out there and kind of hoping and seeing what happens, but really, what is the reactionary process, right? So we start with a campaign. 2 days later, we see how it's operating, what's happening. We adjust and we refine, and then the next 2 days later, we do that again. What happens then is you're more in sync with how it's working, how effectively it's working. Do you need to attract a different type of audience? Is it attracting anywhere near the audience you thought it was? And what it does is it helps you answer other questions, even going into, if you're not digital today, how do you jump into it? Start somewhere, right? And so the most successful attributes to any of the campaigns I would say that we run really are driven by the process of test, monitor, and refine. And what that does is it drives an ultimate outcome several weeks later, several months later, that's positive, versus, let's put something in place and monitor it every 2 weeks or 4 weeks.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of all goes back to when I think about the most successful campaigns, it really goes back to the organic and the paid together. Like that example that I shared, that they ran a campaign with a lot of ad spend by themselves without utilizing all the organic tactics, and they did not see the ROI. And so really engaging and kind of seeing how your audience reacts. So there's been times where we'll put an ad out and say it was going to run for a month, where we switch up the messaging on day 2. And you'll say, wow, is 2 days really good enough to kind of measure the success of that ad? But it is, because you want to see what the engagement is and how many clicks are going through that. But a great way to test it is to also go organic first. So if you want to see it, one way to measure success is basically post out your product or post out whatever you're trying to get across with your messaging in a group organically. So try social on Facebook and see how many people engage with you. So test out the ad organically first. If you get 0 comments or no one responding, there's a really good chance that putting paid effort towards it is not going to get people responding to it as well. So that's one of the things I say with our most successful campaigns is by truly looking at what we're doing and to pivot pretty quickly if we're not seeing a high or low cost per click. So, yeah.
One thing to add there as well, I'm sure many of you on the webinar are leaders, and it's really allowing the team to have a dynamic that knows that they're not pressured into spending or pressured into doing a certain thing, right? And so from an activity standpoint, if there's a bit of flexibility around let's test, let's monitor, let's see how organic and paid can work together, if it takes a week to understand, 2 weeks to understand, that's great. But what happens if we put too much pressure on our teams is that they will go just, hog wild trying to spend, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. And without actually monitoring and understanding, we're so far down the path of spending money that we don't know what's working, we don't know what's not working. So we just have to add additional spend. And so from a leadership standpoint, as you look at your teams, support them and be flexible a bit into how their activities are executed on, and give them that flexibility to test and monitor, and not just spend for the sake of spending.
Yeah, and to also add, thinking about this, what really contributes to a successful campaign is also looking at your competitors. So we didn't really talk about this on the webinar, but running like a competitor analysis and looking at what your competitors are doing that are within your market, and then seeing seeing how much they're spending and what tactics they're utilizing, because then that means you're also going up against their ads. So do you pivot and use another tactic, or find different ways to make your ad messaging clearer or better, etc. So we do that a lot with campaigns to make sure that we know what is in kind of our field and what's out there competing against us. So that will also help raise your clicks, because then if you look at the messaging with your competitor and look at yours and make yours better, or try to engage or utilize a different tactic because you see that one of your paid competitors is throwing thousands of dollars into paid search, then that may not be the tactic that I would recommend for you to go do, because if you're not going to put in the tens and thousands of dollars into paid search.
All right, we have just a little bit more time for more questions. So if you have any, please submit them. So here's another question. With this repeatable model, have you seen this work only with specific industries, or does it work for any industry?
So this can work with any industry. So, and that all goes back to what I said before. It goes down to the question, does the person you're trying to target have a phone and a computer? If they do, then there's one of these tactics, it will work. And we'll get in front of them. Whether that's if we're talking about like a large corporation that's trying to go business to business, that's one thing that we've done, is try to get in front of somebody that they want to see like what your business is, what your brand is. Then there's a way to get in front of that business as well digitally. So it can work across multiple different things, whether that's a consumer campaign, business to business, recruitment campaign, because everybody has a phone and a computer. So one of those tactics will get to them.
And, to beyond this point, I think over the last several months, we've seen some challenges in 2020 that force us to think differently, right? Those that traditionally said if they walk in our door, they see who we are, they see what we are. That's not happening is predominantly today. And so, in thinking about being more nimble and changing the way that we may view what our customers view of us, I think it comes down to what is their preference, right? A lot of time the different demographics around, whether it's socioeconomic demographics or even age demographics, folks may say, oh, well, they don't use cell phones. But now more than ever, folks are on their phones, they're on their laptops, they're using streaming services. And so the thought is, how do we engage with folks differently? Because it has changed quite a bit over the last several months, and it will continue to do that over time. Mm-hmm. It's pushing us to where we may have thought things would drive 10 years from now. It's happening today. And so now it's about pivoting quickly versus, putting a plan in place to do it years from now.
And also, different ads that we ran, let's say back in October, November, for a client that were very successful. Once COVID hit, it was a different ball game. But it's not just COVID related. There's going to be multiple different things that happen that will cause an ad to not be successful, or even your messaging. So sometimes you even have to rebrand how you say something to be able to really pivot and get in front of the audience. And so that's what goes back to that repeatable model. That's why all those tactics, one of them, if one doesn't work and doesn't perform well, then another one may be your winning tactic. And like I said, you don't have to go throw thousands of dollars to test it out the very first day. So that I told you, $7.50. That's a winning number to really see how engagement is. And a lot of people probably think that is extremely low. That is like the price of a kid's meal. So, but it's true. It's very true.
It's worth trying it.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, those are all the questions that we have. A lot of great questions and engagement. Thanks, everyone, for spending today with us. If you want to connect with Parimal or Bianca, here's their contact information. And like they said, a survey will be sent to you right after this webinar, and you can reach out to them there as well. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. And good luck with digital engagement. Bye.